Leanne Linsky, comedy. She's combining two of my passions. I mean, I love comedy. I love, listening. I'm a fan of so many comedians, and technology. She has a platform that she developed during the pandemic. It's online where comedians can come and in live time, uh, and have people come and watch. It's called Plausible. Fascinating background. She's from the Midwest and then Las Vegas. She was in Second City for a while, went to New York City, did open mic for 7 years, moved to Los Angeles, and got kind of sick being in a car. And she went and got her master's during the pandemic and kind of got some more business experience, entrepreneurship, and created this platform. We talk about, I open up with just jokes. She has a certain um, slant on sarcasm. Do you think sarcasm is funny? I wonder. She has her opinion on that. We go right into what makes a joke, why things are funny, how the whole craft of honing, a comedy act is, and how it's done and put together, and the iterations and the movements and the economics of the words. And then we go right into the platform and why she did it, her background. It's a fascinating discussion. Again, two of my passions, technology and comedy, brought together. But it's a great conversation. She opens up about discipline and motivation, and I really, really enjoyed speaking to Leanne. Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz. People ask me, how did I lose 130 pounds? The quick answer is always discipline. I started my business, wasn't paying attention to my health, was eating too much, drinking too much sweets. My daughter was born. Next thing I know, I'm pre-diabetic, I have hypertension. I knew something had to change. Discipline. I, like many of you, have faced many challenges in your career, in your family, in your life, in your faith. How did you attack them? How did you approach them? How did you solve them, hopefully? It all had to have some degree of discipline. I'm also asked, how did you found and start a tech business? And it lasted over 25 years. Discipline. I was committed to it, enjoyed technology, didn't enjoy some aspects of it, but knew it was necessary. Discipline. Our podcast mission, how do we use discipline to better ourselves and society? Join me, please, as I talk to interesting people and discuss how they use discipline in their family and their passion and their careers and how it helped them. Our podcast vision, growth through learning from others. Joey Pinz Disciple Conversations. It'll be light and serious. Join us, please. Thank you for consideration. Goodness, Leanne Linsky, thank you so much for your time. I'm very, very, very excited to talk to you. Can or is sarcasm funny?
Oh, I personally don't think so. I used to think so, and I learned some very hard lessons. I think sarcasm is often has a negative undertone or some form of harshness to it. That's not. It's not laughing with a person; it's laughing at a person. And I've learned that is typically not the best route to go. Yeah, there are people who think they're hilarious because they're sarcastic, and I'm like, that's interesting, not funny, just mean. So that's kind of what I've learned.
Yeah, I've heard you say this. And so it's kind of closer to the insult versus the kind of underhanded compliment.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are insult comics, and they do sarcasm, and like that's their shtick. And I think if that's what people like, that's what they're into. I think of office workers at their desk and sarcasm, probably not going to go over well.
What makes
Yeah.
a good joke? Yeah, what makes a good joke?
A good joke. I think a lot of it is timing.
Hmm.
I think it's delivery. And then I think it's being economical with the words, like getting to the point quickly. Because when people tend to ramble, I'm like, my mind wanders quickly. So I guess in that order: timing, overall delivery, and then wording.
Because I heard you talk about how you kind of create you create a routine, you create the jokes, and you're constantly shaving it, shaving. Then you get in front of some people, and you test it out, and then it's just constant, just iteration and shaving and reshaping of these. It just takes so long. By the time we finally see it in a special, it's gone through so many iterations.
Yeah, so true. Very true. It's a kind of like whittling wood, I guess, you know? It's
Mm,
like it starts out as this chunk of wood, like this is my idea, I'm going to make something of this, or as Seinfeld says, is this something?
right.
And then you chip away at it until you get to the beautiful joke, like, and it's a ongoing process because I can write in one manner, and then when I bring it off the paper and I share it uh, through the, with my voice, then it hits people differently. It comes across different. So I think there's an art in writing a good joke, and then taking that off the paper and delivering a great joke.
It's so different from any other art form. I mean, musicians, they're they write their songs, they're in a musician, they're in a, excuse me, in a studio, they're performing it, they're recording it. And then when they're on the road, they may kind of refine it a bit, but it's pretty much, what they recorded with is whereas you're constantly evolving.
Yeah, I think, well, in a way, it's similar because I
Hmm.
think when a musician, and I'm not a musician, so they may choose to disagree, but in my mind, when a musician's writing their music, we hear of people who are like, well, it took me an hour to write this song in the car. Maybe that, yay, if that's the case, and they can do that and create something so fabulous in that short of time. And I do think occasionally it does happen that way with a joke here or there, but a lot of the times, probably I'm guessing that even though maybe they wrote the words or they wrote a hook or something like that, there's still a process of getting together with the rest of a band and the other
Mm,
people involved, and then, oh, let's tweak this, and then let's bring this here, and then move this over here, and then change up the bridge with this or something like that, right? Or what if we
hmm.
bring in these other elements? So I think even before they record, there's still a process, maybe sometimes shorter, maybe sometimes just as long. And then they record it. And I think, to your point, that might be the difference. Is I think with a comedian, work, we don't have something. I mean, some comedians, we put it out there on social or video or something like that, or Netflix or some sort of comedy special, and that is there permanently. But
Hmm.
if that comedian goes and retells the joke, they still have the opportunity, of course, to change it and to
Hmm.
tweak it. But there's also the thing, if you go see the same comedian 3 or 4 nights in a row, oftentimes you'll see the exact same thing once they dialed it in and get it going. I don't know if you watched that show Hacks.
Yes.
Yeah, and so how the older comedian, night they show the montage of her performing night after night, and she
Right.
reaches for the water at the exact same time. She
Right.
turns to the face the audience. So we do dial it into to that polish so that we know, just like the musician, like, here's where this is the song structure, this is how the song goes, and be able to do that to deliver a really good performance. But it does take a while to get there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Jean Smart, I think that's her name there in Hacks. But yeah, really good show, and it kind of shows that side, Las Vegas act. And Leanne, have you ever wrote a joke and say this is gonna kill, and it just doesn't?
All the time.
Really?
No, I know. It's funny. I think of things of like, oh, that's funny, or I think this is something, and and yeah, I do. Like, sometimes I think, oh, that's pretty funny, and I crack myself up, but it's not always funny in front of other people. Yeah, yeah, especially my husband. He's like, yeah, not funny.
He's your first sounding board. I know sometimes at night I have like an idea and I write it down, and then the next morning I'm like, what the heck? That's not a good idea at all. I guess it kind of has to be fleshed out. But
Yeah.
is there such thing as a bad crowd?
I'd like to think so. Well, I think, yes, there can be, to the degree of what's happened in the room or on the stage before me. So if I'm doing a show and there's other comedians and there's also your host, what happened with their sets? Did the
Mm.
energy go down? Did they lose the crowd somewhere? Is the host doing a good job hosting, or is the host stressed and freaked out about things? Because that carries out into the audience. If the host is upset and stressed or not having a good night, they're constantly on stage in between acts. How is that affecting the room? So other people in the room play a significant role. Also, like, what about if you're in a live club, or bar or restaurant, or is there a group of people watching the game? I can't tell you how many times I performed in a bar and people are like, "Hey, we're trying to watch a game over here." So
Wow.
you can it changes the vibe. There used to be this coffee shop in Long Beach, California, that had this really fun open mic, and it was a hot spot for the college students to study. So they would continue studying with their heads down in books while we were doing our sets. So, not the ideal crowd. So there are things
Yeah.
like that in which you could have a bad crowd. Or if you're in a bar and people are being overserved or something like that, that can
Ah.
also present new things. So there are elements that can contribute to maybe a bad crowd, but like a bad crowd in terms of people and terrible humans, not so much.
Mm.
So
Because you could tell one joke and it dies or bombs, and then next night the same joke the same way, and it does it. It kills.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But there's all
It
those elements that you mentioned.
There are, and then like uh, there's this one show I did. This was in LA, and it was an interesting group of people. It was like in some loft somewhere, and all my jokes are like relationship based and very self deprecating and stuff. And I was like, wow, that didn't, we're normally where I have laughs and things, they weren't happening. And I'm like, what did I do different? And my husband happened to be at that show, and he knows my set front and back. And he was like, well, maybe your timing was off or this was off and stuff. And I also felt as I looked around the room, it wasn't my normal crowd. It was a much
Mm.
younger crowd. So to get up and talk about marriage or divorce or something, maybe they haven't even had a
Mm.
long-term relationship yet. I'm
Mm.
like, maybe that was a miss also, in addition to once I don't get a few laughs, yeah, my cadence changed, my energy
Mm.
shifted. So yeah, it all plays into all that fun stuff.
I I've heard comedians say that, they're trying out new stuff and then it's not doing well and they go back to the kinda tried and true to just to kinda save,
Oh
the
yeah.
I mean, you kinda have some stuff in your back pocket that you know is gonna work.
Yeah, well, and that's just it. Like, if I'm doing an open mic, I'll experiment, I'll try new jokes, I'll riff a bit. If I'm doing a show, I will do tried and true.
Mm.
And rarely in a show will I do something untested. Well, I'll go to pretty much never. I will never do something that's completely new or untested unless it's like something completely in the moment that happens and I have to address it in the room or something. But
Mm.
typically, I don't, once I start my set, if I'm doing new material, it's new material in the sense I haven't put it in a show, but I've tried it out at several mics. Yeah.
And what's your position on crowd work? I hear people complain, we want to hear material crowd work. It's just kind of it's ad hoc. It's not, what they practice. And some people are really good at it and it's very funny. Some are just okay. What's your view on crowd work?
Well, I think I'm not one way or the other necessarily. I see there's two sides to it. There are people, to your point, who do crowd work really well.
Mm.
There's a reason for that because they've practiced crowd work.
Ah.
And crowd work can, to some extent, be smoke and mirrors, right? Because we feel like, as an audience member, we feel like it's fresh in the moment. But if you go see the same comedian several times and see his crowd work or her crowd work, then you'll probably see those same jokes with just a different audience member they choose. So, if I'm doing something about a couple, okay, who looks like a couple, that I could do this joke with? If I try to identify those things. So I think for people who do it well, I think it's because they've really practiced and they've identified a system and a structure to doing it. I think there are the comedians who try and think they're good at crowd work, or maybe they're experimenting with whatever it may be. Um, just to some people just aren't funny in the moment like that,
Mm,
and or maybe they're not as quick on their feet. Maybe they don't really have anything. There, a lot of things could go wrong with crowd work quickly if you're not well versed in it. And so I think it's a special kind of art form in itself. So if people are going to venture out there, I think doing crowd work in a mic or something like that, uh, where people aren't paying for it, would be a good place to start.
yeah, because I think we've all seen it where some wise person in the crowd, what do you do for a living? And they said, well, my dog just died or something. They try to kill it, right? And so then the comedian has to save it. I guess that goes on to my next question is like hecklers. Like
Oh,
where's the place for them?
there's no place for them. We do not. In fact, yeah, I just posted about this on our blog because um, it's interesting. I think people think, oh, the comedians want us to interact. And people will say, I don't want to sit in the front row because I don't want to be picked on.
Mm,
The truth of the matter is if a comedian is doing crowd work, they still want to maintain control of that conversation.
right.
And it's not, and a person doing crowd work has to be able to hold the room. People who think that comedians want to be heckled, let me just preface that with it, we don't. We
Mm,
spend a ton of time working on our material, and especially if someone's not doing crowd work, we don't want to be interrupted in our set. We have a flow, we have our timing, we have our rhythm going. Just like a musician wouldn't want to be heckled in the middle of a song. Like that just kind of stops the music, and it's like, what is
mm,
happening right now?
mm.
So yeah, we typically do not like hecklers at all. It's rude. Like if you were my accountant and you're doing my taxes, you wouldn't want me interrupting you every 2 seconds. You'd be like, please go get a coffee or something. Come back in an hour when I'm done with this. It's the same kind of thing for a comedian. It's very unnerving and rattling and insulting. And I actually had a conversation with a fan one time, an audience member, I'll call, not a fan of mine necessarily, but a person that came to a show and she's like, we're ready to heckle. We're going to do all this. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, you realize, no, 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 like nobody wants you to heckle. And she's like, oh, I thought that's what people are supposed to do. And I'm like, you were misinformed. I'm so sorry. But I had to warn the other comics in the show, like just to be aware. And they got so nervous. I'm like, I told her not to, but they're like, but we don't want that to happen. So it is really, yeah, don't heckle.
Yeah, maybe go over what definition of heckle is for her. Maybe she doesn't quite understand that. It brings me to another. You mentioned nervous. I like what you said about just generally before going on stage. There's a slight
Yeah.
nervousness. Bill Russell, arguably the greatest, basketball player of all time, would always throw up before every game. And even before our conversation, if you make the point of if you're not nervous, it doesn't mean you care. I'm always kind of just all right, am I prepared? I always get a little, and
Yeah.
if that ever flies away, that's a bad sign.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I'm the same way. It's like, if I'm not nervous, I'm like, oh no, this isn't going to go well.
Right, right.
But I consider nervousness the respect that I pay my audience. Like they cared enough to show up, whether it's online or in person. And I care. I care. I want to do well for them. Like that's super important to me. So a bit of nervousness is really good, I think.
Mm.
Yeah.
Fascinating background, Leanne. You're from the Midwest. You
Yeah.
go to New York City. You're there for a while. You develop a one person show. You kind of hone what you're doing. You end up leaving there, going to LA where you're stuck in your car for the whole time. Let's talk about New York and the positives you took away from New York City.
Oh, so many. First of all, the food is
Yeah.
amazing, right? No, so many great things about New York. What I loved about it was the community, the energy of the city. Like it's just unmatched in my opinion. But I met so many wonderful and talented people there that it was just inspiring. I mean, I don't know anybody who moves to New York and is like, I'm going to retire there. I'm like, what? No,
Right, right, right,
you know,
right, right.
you're there to hustle. You're there to
Good
live your
point.
dream
Good
and
point.
to
Yeah.
do something. And people were very disciplined in honing their craft. Like a lot of people I met, we didn't have time to just hang out unless we were collaborating together, working in a play together, doing stuff like that's the social vibe was like depending on how we were all interwoven in, you know, in theater and on stage and comedy and things like that. That's just my whole life revolved around that. And there's just a dedication. And I loved working with people, and I loved working with people who are way better than me
Mm,
on things. I think I don't ever want to be the best person in the room. That
mm,
concerns me.
mm,
It's like,
mm.
oh no, I gotta find some, you know, because I learn from watching others, and not just on stage but off stage, of like what kind of habits do they keep, what kind of um, healthy boundaries, like just what kind of attitude do people have? Who do I, you know, how can I incorporate some of that into what I'm doing? So I think in New York, I really learned a lot about those kind of things, like living the
Mm,
life of a artist. I also really appreciated the community in comedy, in the different improv theaters. And then even with my open mic, I ran an open mic for 7.5 years, and I
yeah.
loved the community that was created and that came out of that. And I don't know, there's just something special about it. So those kind of friendships and connections, and just in general the experience. Like one of my good friends, TJ Mannix, he's an actor and he teaches classes and things, and he would always say, "Our job is the audition. You know, we audition, and it just, you know, getting a callback is a bonus, and
Mm,
getting the job is like amazing vacation. You know, it's like a
mm,
great thing." But his thing was like, what he would say is like, how great is life that he goes, I think of, I'm walking to an audition right now. How many people are like, hey, it's a Wednesday afternoon and this is my job, you know, and
mm.
this is what I do. And he's right. There's something special about that, and how many people get to, and it feels very, there's a lot of gratitude in that, because how many people have the opportunity to go and live that kind of a dream, you know?
7 years in the East Village does a lot to somebody, Leanne. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a great part over there. I know the area very, pretty well. And my goodness, so why'd you leave?
Well, everybody's like, "Oh, did you move to LA for your comedy?" And I guess you could say that. I moved there for a man, and that turned out to be a joke. So, uh, yeah, he dumped me like just a few weeks after I showed up. And you know how hard it is to get a place in New York. And I had just given up a great apartment.
Mm,
Yeah, Queens. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to make this work. And I stayed in, in California, and I produced shows in Long Beach and did some podcasting and all of those kind of things. And it was just, it was hard. It was really hard. And I think for me, that's where a lot of things shifted in my perspective on my comedy, the direction I wanted to take with it, everything just kind of flipped upside down.
mm,
And I don't know that I would have done any of the things I'm doing now had I not made that leap and
right.
made that change. Yeah.
Yeah, because during the pandemic, you decided to get your master's,
I
correct?
did. Yes. So in August of 2019 BC, before COVID, I started
Ha.
doing open mics online because I missed my community in New York, and I wanted to reconnect with some of my open mic regulars and fellow comedians. And then I also wanted to connect with some of the new people I met in LA and blend it all together. So I did that.
Mm,
And then it was going well. And I'm like, how do I take this and scale it? Because I can't replace in person, but how do I bridge the gap so we can do more in between our in person shows? How can I get more comedy in? How I could do more writing and stuff in between my in person shows and know that it works? So I applied for uh, to get my the master's program at University of California, Irvine. And then COVID happened, and I got accepted into that. COVID happened. Everybody started bringing things online, and I'm like, oh, okay. So this is exciting, but why didn't I do this like 2 years ago? Because it would have been fully prepared. But yeah, I did do that, and graduated in 2021 um, with a master's in innovation and entrepreneurship, and got involved in an incubator program at UCI. That led me to an accelerator and more accelerator programs, which really helped me springboard Plausible into the world. So yeah, it was very, going to school during a pandemic is interesting.
Yeah,
And
it certainly is.
also at the age of 50, I was a much better student as an older person than when I was in
Mm.
my 20s. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, always the people that go into the military, and they get the education. When you have them when I had them as fellow students as a young person, they always, you could tell they just took it a lot more serious, and it's
Yeah.
much better than serving, and you just take things just a little bit differently. So you come into Plausible. I mean, you have this idea. It's a great platform. Tell me about it.
Thanks. So Plausible, I did because I was solving some of my own problems, right? And then as I started doing all of my research and running my MVP, my minimum viable product, with existing technologies like Zoom and like a Calendly or Acuity scheduling and a WordPress site and stuff, it was like, how do I get away from cobbling all these technologies together and just have a one-stop shop for live online entertainment? And and by live online, I don't mean like pre-recorded. It's all live, like you and I are talking in real time right in this moment, and can see and hear
Mm.
each other and respond in real time. That's what Plausible is. So it's basically an online comedy club. uh, Comedians, however, there's no gatekeeper. It's basically, it's if someone left a building open and said, look, go do shows, and then to
Mm.
fans, go see shows. And so comedians can log into Plausible. They have all the scheduling tools to put up their own shows, produce, host, attend other people's, get booked in other people's. And um and then when is showtime, because it happens in like an actual time, then they log in, they start the show like they would, for familiarity's sake, like a Zoom room or something like that, except we have our own designed for comedy. And they would open it up, and fans would log in if they've registered or bought a ticket for that show, and they can see and hear the rest of the audience and the comedians all in real time. And then after the show, fans are encouraged to leave ratings and reviews for each performer, not for the venue, but like today, if you were to go to the club, you'd rate and review the venue, but you don't have a way of like telling performers like, great, I loved your set, or, like, hey, I had an idea for your joke, or whatever, or hey, stop doing crowd work.
Hmm.
So, but they can leave those reviews, so they have that engagement directly with the comedians. And then when fans log in, they can look through the whole talent directory and pick comedians that they want to see and see what their upcoming shows are, or they can just go right to the show listings and see what's happening today or this week or this month or in the next few months, and register and buy tickets. And it's also a way for comedians to earn money, because contrary to popular belief, comedians don't always get paid. In fact, most of the
Mm.
time they don't get paid. In fact, we often have to barter, and in exchange to get stage time, or like at an open mic, oftentimes we pay $5 for 5 minutes of stage time
Mm.
just for an open mic to practice. And then,
Wow.
yeah, if we want to do, oftentimes the clubs, if we don't have an IMDb, like a TV credit or a big credit to our name, or aren't well known, the clubs might require that we bring 5 paying customers for 5 minutes of stage time, which means we don't get any money from those 5 tickets sold or those 2 drink minimums. We just get 5 minutes on stage to entertain them. So basically, headliners and features might get a flat rate. So basically, what with Plausible, we're turning the business model upside down and shaking it out and saying, okay, here's the ticketing services, by the way. So not only do comedians get scheduling and the virtual stage, they can also decide, do I want to do a free show or do I want to charge ticket price? And they get the majority of the ticket revenue. even if they only sell one ticket. They don't have to have a minimum number of followers. Like on a lot of platforms on social media, you have to have a minimum number of followers before you can get sponsors or ad revenue. You don't have to wait. You can just start. So
So
yeah.
it's putting the power back into the content providers, kind of like what OnlyFans doing in some industries as well. It's
Hmm.
removing those distributors and putting it back into their hands. Will AI ever be a factor in this, you think?
Yeah, I see where AI could be actually a positive factor in some ways with online, but not. I'm hoping not in the creepy ways or the ones that are most disturbing. Because that's just such a wide conversation we could have on this. There are I think it's like with anything new, it's like we don't know all the things that could go wrong until they go
Right.
wrong, and we're like, oh my gosh, how did that happen? So as a person who founded a tech company, I'm cautiously optimistic, but I don't think would like to say, I would like to say, I don't. As a tech person, how could we use it in a positive way to springboard comedians and artists and help them propel their career? As an artist, or a comedian, I would want to say, oh my gosh, I also want to protect my work. I want to protect my intellectual property. I also want to protect my voice, my looks, because I don't want it to be recreated, like the deep fakes or things like that. Those things are very concerning. And those things are concerning even
Hmm.
beyond entertainment purposes, because I don't want my face and my voice replicated in saying things that I had never said or something like that. Or I don't want someone using that and writing jokes in my voice. So those concerns I think are valid. And I think at the same time, there's also opportunity. So it's a very fine line of
Sure is.
how that'll work out.
Now, couldn't the platform be used for any kind of performing art?
Yes. Yes. Yes, it could. So, as I built this for comedy, with comedy in mind, and comedy is a very, very large market. Comedy is the second most popular live stream genre, only behind breaking news.
Hmm.
So people, with like with 5G and better connections, uh, people really like live streaming because there's a FOMO attached with it. There's a fear of missing out. There's
Yeah.
also, it brings them closer to the content creator because there's this intimate connection. In fact, we did a big show recently and the fans were like, wow, I felt such such a intimate connection because like it was like a private show almost. It's a you can see and hear everybody and you have much more interaction. We had a really great comedian who does wonderful crowd work. His name is Jason Stewart, and he just boom boom boom, and like everybody just immediately was on board with him.
Hmm.
So there's so much opportunity with that. um but no, started talking about that, but yeah, there's this intimate connection on there. So I think
So,
I lost the initial question that you had.
other performing arts
Oh
on your
yes,
platform.
yeah. So there's a couple key things. Um, so that's where it started. But as I built this, we realized like there's opportunity because if it does work for comedy, why wouldn't it work for other solo performers, especially
Yeah.
like storytellers, poets, spoken word, but also I'm really curious about musicians, and I have
Yeah.
several people going to attempt an experiment with some of this because we don't have the audio delays or cutouts that are associated with some of the other technologies that we're familiar with during the pandemic, especially. And people notice that right away. And it's super important in entertainment for a lot of reasons, obviously with music, but like with comedians, if timing is everything, and if I have a delay in audio and I can't hear people laughing. And then all of a sudden I hear
Mm,
people laughing. It throws everything off. So on plausible, I'm like, if they're not laughing, you're just not funny. Like there's no delay. So you'll hear it. And we can talk like as if we're in the same room without it all messing and cutting out. But yeah, there is opportunity, I think, to do these other uh, people in the creative arts and help them also do similar things. Absolutely.
the vision of comedy is interesting to me because it goes the court jester, right? We all know the court jester and the Joker in our deck of cards, right? So it goes back thousands of years. What do you think the future holds for comedy and for comedians?
Ah, I think there's going to be I think because of technology and the way we can connect, I think it's just going to continue to grow. I think
Mm,
there'll always be I think there will always be in-person comedy shows as we know them today. I think that will always be a thing unless God forbid there's another
no.
pandemic or
Mm,
something that wipes us out. But I think there's something magical about that. But I think because of the way we can now connect and and grow our fan bases globally that didn't exist 50 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago.
mm,
I think that cracks open a whole nother avenue in addition to what's already out there. I think there's just now more ways to do it. And I'm excited. I love seeing people go, oh, this is new. Like, remember when YouTube first came out, right? YouTube was like a storage place for video and stuff like that. Like, it wasn't even intended necessarily. I can't remember what the initial thing was that they were doing, but it wasn't what it is today. And it evolved
right.
into, oh, we can use that. And that's what I'm really excited about is like, I love seeing people come on plausible and go, oh, wait, I can do that. It's like, yes, like what? Show me, like a comedian, Grace Fraga has a podcast, and she started putting her podcast on there because now she can
Hmm.
invite fans to be in an audience when she interviews a celebrity guest. And that changes the whole energy of a room to have an audience in there, even if it's a few people, to do a Q&A and to laugh out loud at the jokes or things like that. And then, other people are like, oh, if I have a big following of podcasts, I could do a VIP room. I can uh, have, sell tickets. I can record on Plausible, still download, and then distribute my podcast like I normally would.
Hmm.
But I can do all of these other, have special events and things like that on there. Um, so yeah, there are some cool things. In fact, tomorrow night, someone's going to do a long form improv comedy show on there. And I'm excited to see how that turns out and how they use the tech in order to bring people in and out of scenes and do stuff like that. So I think it's just going to continue to evolve over time and grow because it becomes more accessible to people who wouldn't normally do it.
Where is the center of comedy right now, geographically, do you feel?
What was that? I missed the part of the question. Uh-oh.
Hold on once. Okay, I'm back. I'm not quite sure what happened. Where is the center of comedy right now, geographically, do you feel?
Mm.
Is there?
Yeah, I think it's New York and LA,
Mm,
which is a weird center since they're not next to each other at
mm.
all.
Well, our
But
2 largest cities, right?
they're the two largest cities, and they both
Yeah.
have thriving comedy communities. I think there are other ones coming up in other areas for sure. But when I look at all the open mics in the US, 40% of them are in California and New York.
Wow.
That's a lot. And I think, not everybody like I I had the luxury. I had the luxury of being able to pack up two suitcases and move to New York after I, lost my job of 13 years. Uh,
Yeah.
so, but does everybody have that opportunity? Not necessarily. Probably not. So I think that'll change as technology plays a bigger role as we move forward.
Yeah, and there seems to be a lot of, Austin, see, right? Joe Rogan has a club, a lot of
Yeah.
clubs there and a lot of comedians going there as well. But how about internationally? Do you think in the world, the US is still the center?
Yeah, I do. I know on Plausible, like I'm seeing more people come from other countries. We have a good number of comedians from Canada. We have someone from Ireland, the UK. I know there's someone from Italy. There's there's someone from Sri Lanka, Japan. I mean,
Australia?
New Zealand, I want to
No?
say. No,
Mm-mm.
Iceland.
Oh, I see.
There's a number. There's a good number
Mm.
of people from various places. We have uh over well over 300 comedians on there now,
Mm.
and we have even way more fans enrolled on Plausible. So the fans definitely outnumber the comedians. So I need more comedians doing more shows.
Isn't that
So
interesting?
yeah, but people from all over, definitely.
And can the comedians record and then they could watch fans could watch it non-live?
Yes. So the comedians have the opportunity to record shows if they want on Plausible. They can also publish those shows in the past shows library on Plausible, or they can just download them to play back on their own or distribute elsewhere. What I'm finding is that comedians don't want to necessarily record their shows. They would much
Mm.
prefer, and this is what I thought, they much prefer to do them in real time. Yep.
But don't they wanna record them and review what they've done? I've always heard comedians say that they should do that.
They do. They do like that. So in some cases that I'm seeing that the comedian will request, hey, can you record my set? And other comedians are like, yeah, you don't need to record the set.
That's,
So it depends on what set they're doing, if they need a reel or not. I know when I've never posted, I never made my reels public, like any of my sets. And the reason I did that is like, well, one, it's not necessarily I'm worried about people stealing my jokes, but that is a possibility. And I know that other comedians really worry about that. But and then like maybe they're still working some things out. But mine was like if I put up that set and I'm performing that set, you've already seen that set. So you're going to be disappointed if you come see me. So it depends on how
oh.
much material someone has, if they're still doing that set. Because honestly, like I see a lot of people posting clips of their jokes on like Instagram, for instance. Well, if I see enough of them and I go see you, you're doing the same thing I already saw
Mm,
you do on
mm,
Instagram. So they are giving away a lot for free. And so not everybody wants to do that. And I think that's why we see a lot of crowd work being recorded and posted on Instagram, because
right.
you're not necessarily going to see that when you go see them live.
You mentioned, joke theft. Is it a serious issue? How do we protect against it?
Yeah, I amongst comedians, it's a thing. Like if someone steals someone else's joke, it gets around fairly quickly that
Mm,
person steals jokes. Um and how do you prevent it? Okay, so I'm not exactly sure about the answer of preventing joke theft, because even I was talking to fellow entrepreneurs one time and I made a joke and an entrepreneur was like, "Oh, I'm stealing that." I'm like, "That's not how comedy works." I'm like, "Really? If you sang a song to me and I said I'm stealing that, how would that person was a musician, how would you feel about that?" So it's interesting because people who aren't comedians think they can take your jokes
mm,
and use them as their own or not credit you. Even like if I present in a networking event or a pitch, or something event or something like that, I'm weary of sharing some things because people will be like, "Oh, I'm going to use." They do. They always say, "I'm going to take that." I'm like, "Who are you? Clearly, you're not a comedian because you don't do that."
right.
Um, but uh, one time when I was running my mic in New York, I told this joke. It was a, it was a example of something that my dad did or something like that. So it was, it was a unique situation, right? The following week, a comedian who wasn't a regular at my mic showed up again and told the same exact joke as though
Wow.
it was his own. And the whole room turned and looked at me like,
Huh.
"Oh, what is going to happen?" And I was like, "Huh, well, that's interesting." I found it fascinating. I'm like, I wonder what's going to happen. And all the other comedians took care of it for me because they protect the community. The community kind of polices itself, I guess.
Interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Perhaps we found a good application for AI, joke theft.
Right? Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Exactly.
I remember hearing Robin Williams, and he got accused sometimes of doing this, and comedians would come up to him, and in his defense, he was experimenting a lot on hallucinogens, and he wasn't sure what he heard and what he didn't hear. I guess there could be innocent theft. Where did I hear this? I'm not sure I heard. And I guess if it happens once or twice, there's an excuse. But I guess obviously if it's a repeat offense, it's something to be noted.
Yeah. I think there's a weird line there. And I think that's very true. And I have noticed there are jokes that I've told, and I'm like, did they hear that from me? But it's possible someone else thought of a similar joke, especially if
Mm,
you're doing anything topical, Like I have a lot of jokes about divorce, and I said something once, and I'm like, oh, are they using my joke, or is it possible they thought of a one liner that's
mm,
similar because they are also divorced? Maybe, hard to prove, right? Um,
mm,
so there are things also, if we're all in mics together and someone's talking about something and you're like, oh, I have an idea about that same topic, where is that line? So, but there are some things that are very like blatant, obvious, like the example from the person that came to my mic and literally
mm,
told this horrible joke. And everybody, I mean, there's just the obvious, and then there's the head scratcher. It's like, is
mm.
it? Yeah.
Awkward. I do
Yeah.
hear of comedians kind of, bantering one another, and then somebody saying a joke, and then them suggesting to add tags, right? Oh, I'll also add this kind of tag to it, and they kind of collaborate that way. I would think that's the spirit in which hopefully the comedians work.
Yeah. There's plenty of mics where, people will like in person, comedians would gather afterward and be like, oh, you could add this to that or this to
Mm,
that, and
mm,
in those instances, like, here, you can have that. And there's online mics like on Plausible where they're peer-to-peer feedback, and we share in,
mm,
let me give you, here's some ideas how to punch up that joke, and that's a gift, to one another. um, but if there's a adjacent joke, maybe not exactly what they were doing or something, it's like, but this is now my joke. If you want to
mm,
do a similar setup, get your own punchline, but or something like that. Like we kind of, it's a give and take. If it's something, yeah. If you're not going to use it, then I'm going to use it, type
mm.
thing. So there's an opportunity to have those conversations. Yeah.
I mean, you're combining two of some of my passions, technology and comedy. I mean, it's wonderful what you're doing. It's very exciting. So when I started my business in the 90s, Leanne, I worked way too hard, and hopefully you're not doing this, and not paying attention to my body, and I got, poor diet and soda and pizza, and got myself up to 340 pounds, and the doctor said to me, if I don't lose weight, I'm not going to see my daughter graduate. She just graduated, by the way, from Cal State, not too far from here.
Yay.
Yeah. And so I proceeded to lose about 130 pounds in the next 6, 7 months. And people always ask me how. And I just say discipline. You mentioned it before. I wonder how discipline plays a role in your life.
Oh, I'm so glad we're talking about this because to to your point, having starting a business is it's just a whole another level of
Hmm.
chaos, right? And things get out of balance, and they can get out of balance very quick. I don't think we're ever totally in balance because um, that's just not how life works. Unfortunately, there's always
No.
more focus on one thing here or there. But to your point of discipline, what I've learned in this process is before I started my business, I had a routine, right? I had really great habits, and I worked out first thing in the morning, because then I didn't have any opportunity to talk myself out of it all day, that kind
Mm,
of stuff,
mm,
right?
mm.
And I
Me
just
too.
stacked that. And once I took care of myself, then I could take care of everybody else. But if I don't start my day by taking care of myself, forget it. So
Mm.
what happened is when I started this business, and starting with going back to school and then starting this business and all of that, and COVID, everything changed because the gym, everything that I would normally do shut down. Right. And I got undisciplined. I got disciplined in the sense like the first thing I would do would go be sit at my desk. So although I was still very habit uh, friendly, my habits weren't good in the sense I stopped taking care of my physical self in the way that I was accustomed to. So my discipline shifted, and I
Mm.
think that so I got up and I would start and I would do all my homework and my assignments and my class. Like I was very disciplined about all that stuff. But what lacked was some sort of balance, and and by balance I mean just dedicating a specific amount of time to taking care of my body. Because once COVID, as we worked our way out of that, over the years, it was very hard to get that back in my life and be disciplined again on taking care of my body. So, just in this past year, I rejoined the gym, and I am now actually focused on, I eat pretty well, but because I wasn't exercising, that changed everything, and it changed my
Mm.
metabolism, it changed everything. And so I'm in the
Mm.
process of now, speaking of discipline, I'm doing the elimination diet because I've somehow formed an intolerance to some food. And I thought it was gluten, but I don't, there's a lot going on. So I have to like, that is going to take some willpower to
Mm.
do in this next
Mm.
week. So I think it's really important now that I'm back at the gym. What helped me get
Mm.
recommitted to my gym routine was I go to classes, because if I go and it's just me and the equipment, I'm halfway there. I at least
Mm.
show
Mm.
up, but I'm not doing what I need to be doing. But if I do a class, it takes the pressure off of me to think of what should I be working on and what should I be doing. And
Mm.
I by showing up, I'm already there. Now I just have to put in the effort. And that's helped me considerably. And our one of the instructors has put together a challenge, and the challenge is just attendance. And there's a poster board, and we just check in and put a star next to our name every time that we show up. Game on. A healthy competition for me with people that in that class has done me wonders. Like when I wake up, instead of hitting the snooze alarm, I'm like, oh, that poster board. Someone will see that I wasn't there, or I'll lose my second place.
Wow.
And so that really motivates me. I've tried apps, I've
Mm.
tried all these other things, but apps just get lost with all the other
They
notifications
do.
going off on my
Yeah.
phone. And it feels very impersonal. But this feels personal. And everybody in the class is like, wow, this is a game changer. So finding something, some way for me, and then in that discipline area of being recommitted to my taking care of my physical self, is having other people see it, you
Mm.
know, making it,
Accountability.
yes, yep, accountability. And not, I tried that with my running group friends, and texting and meeting up in between our regularly scheduled runs. But because everybody's schedule was all over the place, I found there was a lot of cancellations, and
Mm.
that made it
Mm.
so easy for me to get out of it. But at the gym's always open at that time.
Right.
The instructor is always there. Doesn't
Mm.
matter about everybody else in the class. And they don't have to text. There's no, I'm not a texter. So that stuff just doesn't work for me. So I found this thing that works for me. They are super stable and relentless with their consistency. So therefore I have to be. So that's a huge thing, is taking care of myself. There's a significant difference, because if I take care of myself physically, I'm sleeping better.
Mm.
And if I'm sleeping better, I am less crabby. I'll admit, like, we get crabby. Like if I am cranky or having a bad day, I have to look at the acronym is HALT. Stop. Am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? And that tells me where I'm not being committed to my overall well-being. So those things. So taking care of my exercise in the morning is huge. And then
Mm.
I'm always at my desk no later than 9 a.m.
Hmm.
So
You crave routine?
I love routine.
Yeah,
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of routine. It's less decision making for me.
right.
I don't, it's a no brainer. It's like, oh, yeah, that time's set aside. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to negotiate. It's just done. So now my next area that I'm focused on is weekends
Mm.
because as an entrepreneur, it's me spinning all the plates all of the time. But that's really hard to do if I'm getting, overworked, and all work and no play. There has to be some time for play. So what I'm working on now is half a day Saturday, and I strive for a full day on Sunday.
Good for
Um,
you.
so that's my goal, and I'm shooting for that. So there's a book I'm reading called The One Thing, and I can't remember the author's name, but it's really good, and I love it because it's the simplest idea. It's just pick the one thing, and I put the one thing that my goal is on the board. So whenever I look at what I have to do, what's the one thing I have to do today that's going to give me the biggest results, and that's the thing that I do first,
Mm.
and then everything else can wait.
I don't know if you heard of the book Eat the Frog. It's a similar concept. The frog is the big thing. Eat it first, get it out of the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, very, very similar. Um, it's amazing how discipline plays a role just so different from everyone. I've heard things like, routine, accountability. It's it's wonderful. It's amazing to me that we could be so disciplined in some areas and not in others, but when
Yeah.
we really need it, it's there. Leanne Linsky, what motivates you?
Hmm. That's a great question. It makes me think, and as I'm processing this, I'll process out loud. One of the things that I was reading, one another book that I recently read was The Love Languages. What is your love language, right? And things that speak to us. And so when I think about that, I'm like, I'm not a, I would like to say money, but I'm also an entrepreneur. So no, but yes, it does, right? Like,
Mm,
so,
mm,
so that
it's a
is,
factor.
that's like obviously a factor, a no brainer, but truly what I think it is to, I really want to make a difference. Like the what motivates me is the ability to be creative
Mm.
and have a large impact on people. Yeah. And when I put those two things together, I guess what motivates me is a really juicy challenge.
It's fascinating to me how Leanne, how I talk about art and science. To me, comedy is creative, very artful. Although I'm sure some people, I think George Carlin actually had it more of a science. He kind of had a ways of phrasing things and putting
Mhm.
things together. But then you have the discipline of your business and running it and being a platform, what you need to do there. So it seems to me, you have kind of these art and science. I think if I'm guessing that at the core of yourself, you're an artist, but you do have this science area because you got a master's in business and you have to run this business. And is there a constant fight there? Are you weighing between the two often?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's funny. This came up the other day. There was an improv teacher I had. Her name was Liz Allen, and it was way back before I had moved to New York. I was still living in Las Vegas, and I was taking classes from her through the Second City training center out there, and I met with her one day. I'm like, I really love this improv thing. I want to keep going. Like, what advice can you give me? And she was so encouraging. But she said to me, she said, it's interesting. She goes, with you, she goes, I think, you could do these things. But she goes, I see you getting, she goes, my one thing would be, are you going to get bored with this because you have this business mindset too?
Mm.
Weird, right? Weird that I also remembered it, because it struck me as like, well, that was interesting. Like, what does that mean? And then I went off to New York, and I'm like, doing immerse myself in comedy and all the things. But I've always had this other side of like, how can I make this the 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 venue? But I was an office manager for a theater. Like, how can I improve here? How can I make a difference? I don't know what it is. It is very odd, and a lot of time it's a very unusual mix of qualities, I guess. And so
Mm.
funny. I have, like my husband's like, he's like, you see things in a very different, unique way.
Making a difference in a juicy challenge. So given that, how do you measure success?
Well, I keep this right in front of me all day so I can measure it.
12-inch ruler.
Yes. I think, successes come in a variety of ways. And I measure it by what my personal goals are. And I
Mm.
always have them in front of me. I have a big whiteboard um, that I write things down on. And I have a game card actually that I used to create, and then I'd play for results. So I would like, not like a to-do list necessarily. There'll always be things that have to be checked off of like a laundry list, if you will. But there's always like, how can I play for results where I can't guarantee an outcome, but I can put myself out there and see what happens. So I think those would be successes, like reaching out to someone and see if, simple as like when you reach out to do a cold call and be like, hey, will you sign up or something like that. There's always a success or a win in that. Um, or yeah, getting X number of users on the platform is always the thing. Like, oh, I want to see more people engaged and attending shows and growing that. There are wins there. But I caution myself of uh, like in comedy in general, like when new people come on, of measuring success to somebody who's been doing this for 20 years. Like, that's a hard pill to swallow. Like, set your
Mm.
own ruler. What is it that you really want out of this? What do you want your life to look like? And how do you want to feel at the end of every day? And if you're doing those things and you're getting closer or starting to live those dreams, then I think that's what success is. Because when I moved to New York, there was this one guy. He's like, had been in New York for several years, and I had known this person for a really long time in my life. And um, one night we hung out and we met some other people, and he's like, oh, well, this is Leanne. And then something happened and those people walked away. He goes, well, I didn't want to say you were an actor because, well, you don't get paid and make your living necessarily off it. And I was like, well, that's interesting. I
Mm.
go, do you consider yourself a firefighter? And he's like, well, yeah. I go, but you're a volunteer firefighter. So is that
Mm.
entirely accurate? And woo, that was a game changer for that
Mm.
person. I'm like, hey, if I'm doing all of he's like, well, I'm doing the work and I'm putting out fires. I'm like, well, I'm on stage and there's a paying audience. That money just didn't transfer into my hands. So how do you do that? So I really think that, you could be, people who are scared to say, am I an
Interesting.
actor because I'm not making a full living off of it? Are you acting? Are you doing plays? You can
Mm.
be more than one thing in your life. People who do comedy and they're starting out, can I say I'm a comedian? I don't know. Can you? What are you doing that, you know, or how do you become a comedian? You do comedy.
Mm. Yeah, by that token, because there's those, people. I know people who are funny around, in a group of friends, right? But when you put them on a
Yeah.
stage, it's a very different kind of thing,
Yes.
because you can't use those inside, jokes, and you have to be prepared up there. So, but you're right though. But if you're not being paid, it doesn't necessarily mean you're not that professional. It's a very interesting line there.
Hmm. Yeah. It is. And there's a lot of comedians who are comedians, but they may have made $100 this year. You'd
Mm.
be surprised. It's a very interesting industry where most of those people on stage aren't making much money. They're getting paid with a free drink or a burger, or they had to buy that stage time or work for the theater or take all of the classes at a theater in
Mm.
order to get that hosting gig because it's a privilege, not a job. So, yeah.
Well, Leanne, absolute pleasure speaking with you. Like I said, you're combining a couple of my. I love comedy. I love, I've been watching it for a while. I love technology. You're combining the two. Anybody listening, how can we get in touch with you? Plausible with two Z's.
Thanks. Yes, you can. There's a contact form on plausible.com. So you can contact me there. You can follow me on Instagram at plausible and on Facebook at plausible. And we're currently on Twitter at plausible, but that may change. We may shift over to TikTok. So you may find us
Mm.
on there. Yes.
Plauzzable. Plausible. We will make sure to put it in the show notes. I thank you so much for your time, Leanne. If I'm ever up in the, I believe you're in the greater Northwest, perhaps we'll get a cup of tea.
That would be wonderful. This has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
You be well, Leanne. Talk to you soon. Continued success.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Disciple Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Would you like to financially support the podcast? You can go to our Patreon site. Consider $5, $10, or $20 a month. There's all kind of plans that we have there. There's like a one-time payment. What is this podcast episode worth to you? $25, $50, $100, $500, $1,000, $5,000. You be the judge. You can go to our PayPal account to do that as well. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pinz Disciple Conversations.